Thank you, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Zano Faisman, and I'm the Chief of the Knowledge Management section here at the UN Office for South-South Cooperation. A warm welcome to all of you to this important joint event on advancing inclusive digital trade through a multi-stakeholder cooperation, organized jointly by the Digital Cooperation Organization and the UN Office for South-South Cooperation in the context of the 2025 FFD and the fourth FFD PrepCom. It also represents a meaningful collaborative step by the two institutions towards gathering momentum ahead of the FFD conference in Spain this year. The recently signed statement of intent between the UNOSSC and the DCO marks the beginning of a robust partnership aimed at advancing digital economy through South-South and Triangular cooperation. The areas of cooperation include promoting cross-border digital trade, enabling secure data exchange, and cultivating a skilled mobile digital workforce. Before I go further, let me take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation to all the speakers that have joined us, both in person and online. We have got a very strong panel, and considering their rich experience and expertise, we are looking forward to some concrete and actionable outcomes. We also take note of the presence of the permanent missions, the UN entities, and also other partners. A huge appreciation is also due to our DCO colleagues, Samim, and the team there for all their support and working with us very closely. Dear guests and participants, digital trade is evolving rapidly, driven by trends such as the rise of e-commerce, the proliferation of digital platforms, and the increasing importance of data as a critical asset. These trends are reshaping how businesses and governments operate and how countries engage in trade. According to the 2024 UNCTAD Digital Economy Report, global digital trade grew faster than overall trade in goods and services between 2015 and 2023, and it is expected to account for nearly 25% of world trade by 2030. As we navigate this transformation, it is crucial to recognize that national digital transformation strategies and policies, as well as regulatory frameworks, are being developed worldwide. According to a 2023-2024 UNDP mapping, over 130 countries have developed national digital transformation strategies, including initiatives for e-government, digital economy, cybersecurity, and innovation ecosystems. The 2023 OECD Digital Economy Outlook notes that divergence in digital standards, data governance, and cross-border regulations could fragment the digital standards, data governance, and cross-border regulations. The 2023 UNCTAD Digital Economy Report warns that digital divides and lack of interoperability threaten the ability of developing countries to fully participate in global trade. So there is a pressing need for alignment and convergence, especially in the current financial climate. Dear participants, digital trade is a powerful catalyst for achieving the SDGs. It fosters economic growth, reduces inequalities, and promotes sustainable development. The role of South-South and Triangular cooperation is vital in enabling scalable and inclusive digital ecosystem. By leveraging these and other cooperative frameworks, we can align financing and funding strategies with our digital transformation goals, as highlighted in the broader FFD agenda. The 2023 UNCTAD report emphasizes that expanding inclusive and secure digital ecosystems, especially through South-South and Triangular cooperation frameworks, is essential for enabling developing countries to participate in and benefit from digital economy. Having said this, we also need to move from policy to practice. The African Continental Free Trade Area's Digital Trade Protocol, for example, stands as an example of regional success. The protocol can inspire replication by demonstrating how digital trade frameworks can be effectively implemented. We will hear more about it during today's session. However, we must address the current financing gap. Innovating financing mechanisms, including PPPs, MDPs, and the private sector play a crucial role in bridging this gap. Finally, let me emphasize that the issue of digital skills is paramount in the context of the emerging opportunities brought by the intensified digital trade. Enhancing digital skills can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of operations, reinforce transparency and accountability, and ensure that the workforce is prepared to leverage new technologies. This is particularly important for developing countries where digital literacy and capacity building are crucial for bridging the digital divide and fostering inclusive growth. With those sort of initial thoughts from my side as a moderator, let me now invite Mr. Hassan Nasser, the Special Envoy Multilateral Affairs at the DCO, to deliver some opening remarks. Over to you, Hassan.
Thank you very much. So we always say that the most valuable non-renewable resource is time. So I thank you everyone for dedicating some time this morning for this conversation. It's my pleasure and my honor to welcome all of you for this side event on the sideline of all these FFD letters. So we'll not go through that. We know that there is an urgent question to address in terms of mobilizing resource for sustainable development. But first of all, I would like to thank the Office for South-South Cooperation, the amazing team and its director for bringing us today here. It was a great collaboration in, let's say, the activation of the statement of intent that we signed in February this year, based on shared goals for South-South and triangular cooperation. I also would like to thank you all. We have today, I think, a very diverse audience and participant, which is really one of the objectives of the side event, to bring together member states, but also international organizations, private sector, and civil society. Since we are preparing the 4th Financial for Development Conference, and let's call it FFD4 for the sake of time, we have a consensus saying that we are facing mounting fiscal pressure, and increasingly limited resource for sustainable development. We need to find innovative and impactful financing approach for this urgent question. At DCO, we believe that one of the solutions, one of the answers comes from digital innovation, which remain critically underfunded despite the centrality of the economic transformation and the economic growth that it provides. So in this context, we believe that digital economy and digital trade must be a core pillar of any future global financing framework for development. We need to close this gap, but it requires also strategic, data-driven investment and new forms of public-private partnership to build infrastructure, expand inclusion, and create new solutions for economic growth and resilience. We are committed to support this through actionable tools and meaningful conversation. By driving the economic growth and reducing inequalities, fostering regional cooperation, the digital economy can unlock sustainable development. However, the potential remains constrained today by fragmented policies, lack of data, and unequal access. We have a lot of numbers showing how digital economy, digital trade can provide additional resource and growth. Numbers are amazing, but the number which is more scary remains these 2.6 billion people offline. For many nations, mainly in the global south, limited access to digital infrastructure, digital platform, digital skills, and fragmented environment remains the key issue to participate fully to the digital economy. More specifically, 80% of SMEs in developing countries face significant barriers to engage in cross-border digital trade due to the gap in skills, proper payment system, and policy fragmentation. Women-led business are disproportionately affected by this issue. In the 4-year agenda adopted by the DCO Council during the 4th General Assembly in February 25, the DCO Council endorsed a specific strategic pillar to promote cross-border digital trade, enable secure data exchange, and cultivate skilled and mobile digital workforce. To support these efforts, DCO is providing actionable solutions that we are keen to discuss today and in the future in the context of the FFD4 preparation. The first one is the Digital Economy Navigator, which is a flagship data-driven tool to support government and investors in identifying strategic investment and across the dimension of digital enablers, digital business, and digital society. The Digital Economy Navigators will enable stakeholders to assess digital maturity, identify priorities, and design targeted investment. We also want to work on digital economy agreement, and during the fourth General Assembly, the DCO established a Digital Trade Cooperation Committee for DCO member states to discuss alignment, learn from each other, and coordinate digital trade initiatives. Digital economy agreement provisions such as digital identity recognition, data flow framework, e-payment interoperability can become the engine for job creation, innovation, and new resource mobilization. In the context of the FFD4, we have a unique platform to elevate the digital economy as a strategic pillar of global development financing dialogue. We also have an opportunity to build new coalition and partnership with multilateral development banks, international institutions, private sector, governments to unlock and scale financing for digital development. We also have the opportunity to integrate and mainstream new metric systems such as the Digital Economy Navigator for future monitoring and evaluation of the financing for development. This will allow us to mobilize new resources, strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation, and hopefully advance inclusivity and sustainability of the digital economy. I encourage today all speakers and participants to share ideas and actionable innovative solutions. How do we move from high-level commitment to concrete, scalable, impactful solutions, particularly for developing countries and marginalized communities? On our side, the DCO stands ready to work with all partners at FFD4 to rethink financing for development through digital lens. I'm very sure that this conversation is the beginning of a journey, which will of course pass by Sevilla for the FFD4, but it also goes beyond. In a world where investing in data-driven solutions, fostering public-private partnership, and enabling digital trade and investment, we will ensure the digital economy becomes a cornerstone of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Thank you very much for your remarks. We now have a recorded statement from the UNOSSC Director, Dima Al-Khatib, who is currently on an official travel.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, welcome to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, and thank you for joining us for this pertinent side event on advancing inclusive digital trade through multi-stakeholder cooperation. I wish at the outset to thank our partners, the Digital Cooperation Organization, for the stewardship and co-organizing this dialogue. In the lead-up to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, we are reminded that financing sustainable development cannot be achieved by traditional means alone. We need bold, inclusive, and cooperative strategies rooted in the realities and homegrown innovations of the Global South. South-South cooperation has long stood as a cornerstone for solidarity among developing countries. Today, it is a catalyst for transformation and development acceleration. It enables countries not only to
You see, the issue of connectivity remains a challenge. Even here.
Yeah.
Let's proceed and then we come back to the presentation, right? Thank you. Thank you very much for your understanding. We will now move to our distinguished panel that will focus on how multi-stakeholder partnerships accelerate digitalization, funding, and implementation. We have about 45 minutes for this segment, and since we would like to achieve some concrete outcomes, I'm kind of requesting all of them to focus on identifying practical and actionable solutions, including replicable models, financing mechanisms, and policy frameworks. After the interventions, we'll have about an interactive dialogue for about 10 to 15 minutes. So for online participants, please feel free to share your reflections or questions in the speakers panel, in the chat box. So to kick off the conversation, let me invite Nshuti Mbazi. She is the Managing Director, the Better Than Cash Alliance, a UNDP-hosted alliance. Since 2020, she has been leading the Alliance's Africa policy and advocacy and partnerships efforts, notably the successful integration of responsible digital payments and digital public infrastructure into African Continental Free Trade Area Protocol on digital trade. Before joining the UN, she's also worked in Africa and the private sector, and also worked as a policy advisor to the Rwandan Development Board, IT department. And Judy, can I give you the floor?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and again, thank you for spending time with us this morning. I think a question that was posed to us was on what the current status is of digital trade in Africa, and are we doing enough? There is no question Africa is a pioneer of mobile financial services, and you see it in many places that you go, mobile money being utilized, and is becoming more interoperable and therefore inclusive. If you go in the bustling markets of many African countries, you will see digital trade happening, but from a payments perspective. Digital commerce is also growing, but there still remains a lot of opportunities for investment, especially on getting more Africans online. There is no digital trade without connectivity. It is the foundation that we stand on. But on payments, I think we're making a lot of progress. And what remains is to interoperate the wallets, the mobile money wallets, the bank wallets, whatever it is, because with interoperability comes the opportunity for choice and gives users the best services possible, because economies of scale are in place, and now service providers can only compete on the quality of service and the cost of service. On the digital identity, on the digital identity front, there are 55 countries, each with their own national identities, similar to payments with their own national switches, except for, of course, the ZOF and ZAFA countries. But with the protocol on digital trade, we see it as our moonshot for uniting 55 ID systems into one. Already we are moving with IDs. ECOWAS has an ID, EAC has an ID, with a digital identity that the countries have agreed upon to have a continental digital ID to simplify the movement of goods and services. We should, hopefully by 2030, begin to see that come to the fore. But it's an expensive undertaking. We had a chance to visit India with the AFCFTA Secretary General and the digital trade team. And we learned that it cost $1.8 billion to build the Aadhaar system. It costs $120 million to run it on an annual basis. And this clearly cannot come from development support, or even it has to come from private investment and as many PPPs as possible to get it done. And the heads of state, knowing the urgency of digital ID, and thanks to, again, the father of Aadhaar and the support that he's provided to the AFCFTA Secretariat, putting together an implementation plan for that AFCFTA digital ID, the heads of state said, hurry up and get this done. And also approved for a special purpose vehicle to be established specifically to hurry up and get it done. And I believe that with the support of India and other partners in this South cooperation, but even the continent especially itself, to invest in getting this digital ID going. When these interoperable ID systems, payment systems, trusted data sharing are in place, which we have done in the protocol on digital trade, we should end the fragmentation that has been mentioned today of 55 countries. We should end the fragmentation that makes it so difficult for goods and people and services to move across the continent, because we've united in this Africa Continental Free Trade Area, particularly the Digital Trade Protocol, which set a record from start to finish. We did it in 18 months. It goes to show the political will that is there, the business that we're seeing in this. And inclusion is not a charity, it is a profitable business. And I can say that with confidence as a banker who's been working on this. So I see that in the next year or so, we should have harmonized regulations, harmonized policies to actualize the digital trade foundations that we need for investments to flow in laying this infrastructure. You also asked how our work is driving the SDG agenda, and the SDG agenda and the Agenda 2063 I should say sisters, and really about peace, prosperity, and planet. And the foundation of that is really digitalization. When you think about the peace, prosperity, and planet goals of SDGs, the socio-economic aspects of the SDGs, particularly if you look at adaptation, climate adaptation and other things, without digital public infrastructure for people to, in case of crisis, be able to move easily, access services wherever they are, receive government support or other support wherever they are to start again. Digital payments, digital IDs are fundamental to getting this done, and we see that for Africa being very much possible and reachable when we implement the protocol on digital trade. From a prosperity perspective, financial inclusion, which is especially enabled by digital public infrastructure like digital payments, which Better Than Cash Alliance has been working on for the last 13 years, is the gateway to economic opportunities, because once you have a financial account, you're able to access finance, you're able to save, you access credit and protective services like insurance. With government, transparency and accountability are possible, and therefore when digital trade is being activated, the resource mobilization becomes easier, tax leakages become more preventable, and that taxonomy is where government will take from to invest in better services delivery that would then lead to lasting peace. Peace is typically disturbed when there is inequality in opportunity, and I really believe that when Africa and the South cooperation happens, we can see lasting peace, and we can invest in, when we invest in digital trade, I have no doubt that there is greater equality in economic opportunities, because digital is a great equalizer. We will all have everything that we need to not have to pick up a gun and go fight each other. We will instead focus on building and growing the wealth in our pockets. Therefore, really the practical way is to accelerate the implementation of the protocol on digital trade. The political will is there, the investment is what we need to get it started and to get it done. And in so doing, really give the SDGs and the Agenda 2063 a chance to be a reality in our lifetime. And I'm excited to be part of this work.
Thank you very much, Shruti. In the interest of time, we'll move to the next speaker. We have one of the speakers at the back, so we'll make some arrangements for you to be here. Thank you so much. So now the next speaker is Jane Munga. She's a fellow at the Africa Program Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She has been focusing on technology policy. Her career has focused on policymaking with emphasis on potential digital technologies for digital development. Prior to joining the Carnegie, Jane worked for the government of Kenya as an advisor and economic expert. In her capacity, she has focused on digital economy policies and strategies for digital transformation. So Jane, we would appreciate if you can reflect on what are the key considerations in translating digital trade policy to practice. What lessons can we learn from digital public infrastructure, experiences across the world, and how can we translate it into a viable digital corridor? You have about 5 minutes.
Wow, 5 minutes. Okay, I will try my best. But first, if I can just get maybe by a thumbs up that you can hear me. Oh, perfect. I hate to be talking to myself. But first and foremost, I also want to say thank you and recognize the organizers of this conference, DCO, UN Office of South and South Cooperation. Thank you very much for convening this. I think it's a very timely conversation, and really glad to be on board to talk about how what are the key considerations in translating digital trade policy to practice. My previous speaker, and Shruti, good to see her here also. It's someone I've interacted with in the past. Talked about some of the things I'm going to share, so I'm going to be double clicking on those points, but also coming out with two tangible points, especially on the policy perspective. So the question here is, how do we translate digital trade from policy to practice? For me, I want to approach this maybe that we may need to have to reshift how we are doing the policy in the first place. So my reflections are first also made from an African perspective. As you heard, I mostly focus, but I think there are lessons that can come generally from that. So as we know, digital trade, first and foremost, just by its terminology, it's a nuanced policy regime because it has elements of different departments, especially when you look from it from a government perspective. You have elements of the platforms themselves, as we saw, digital infrastructure. So the platforms that are being used for that. We have then what we have come to know as the DPI foundations. We have elements of digital ID, data movement, digital finance, and so forth. And of course, the movement of the goods and services themselves. From a policy perspective, all these are very different policy organizations, especially when it comes to government, because you're dealing then with different agencies that are developing the rules. For example, digital ID usually is done by ministries of interior. When it comes to trade, there's a ministry of trade. And when it comes to infrastructure, like my former background is where you start talking about connectivity, the arm of government that helps develop digital connectivity in line, and also maybe also develops other policies like cybercrime and so forth. But in a nutshell, my point here is that while all these elements at some point do complement each other, sometimes we also have to understand, are they actually speaking to each other? Do they interoperate, or do they help each other build the synergies of this? For example, when you look at DPI, DPI is built on an architecture that is that builds itself on top of each other. For the data ID, digital ID, for the digital finance and also data, the architecture itself is very clear that we are trying to build something for private sector and for government. But the architecture for policy, are we using that kind? So for me, I guess my first point here, and I think which would be the first takeaway, is we need to start looking at how we change the architecture of how governments are developing these policy perspectives. In a recent policy piece that I wrote, African policy about how we look at the DPI infrastructure, we really call for one thing. We need policymakers to develop national guidelines for governance frameworks for DPI, because we see the need to have policy frameworks that begin to cast vision on how governments are then able to have policy that can be put into practice, that is cohesive and that is well designed to complement each other. And then secondly, even as we build these kind of policies, we also have to also ensure that these policies or the regulations are also visible to those who are interacting with them. One of the research that I do here at Carnegie is we have built a tracker. It's called the Africa Technology Policy Tracker. And it is built on the premise that we need to be aware of how the continent is shaping itself. So we have been trying to put together the different policies, laws and regulations that form the digital economy. And sometimes it's not always easy to understand where they are. And this makes it also harder for those who want to participate in digital trade. So having an awareness or having government repositories that are able to publicize this kind of documents, I think is the second takeaway for me from a policy perspective. That is not good enough that we have this new policy architecture, but also do we have repositories that are being used to develop for anything that is dealt on digital trade. Because again, remember, these are usually done in different departments. And we have seen some good work coming out of here. I really have to commend the AFCFTA. They put together what they call an e-tariff book. And I think there is value in also addressing other aspects of digital trade. For example, if you need a rules of origin today, if I have a product that I want to move from Kenya to Malawi, where do you get a certificate? Some government agencies, you're able to find them, but on the other hand, do we have a central repository where it's easy to identify how you get all these regulatory documents? Because sometimes that could make or break the trade itself. But in conclusion, I think those are my 2 key points that I want us to walk away with, is how do we develop the policy architecture, and how then do we surface these documents, and pushing for a policy repository, grow the initiatives that are coming from AFCFTA to ensure that these tariffs and any other documents that aid in that are easily shareable and are easily accessible. And I want to borrow my takeaway shot from what I think Shuti mentioned, that we need to do this quickly. I think there's now an imperative that we have to move with speed. AFCFTA just launched the annexes of the digital protocol, which is this is a huge step. But now we want to see policy leadership that acts forward and boldly to ensure that adoption is really moving to policy, into action. But for that, then we need to ensure that we have the right policy architecture in place, and these are visible. Thank you very much. I hope I've kept my 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, you have much. Colleagues, let's move on to the next speaker. We have Priya Vora. She is the CEO of Digital Impact Alliance. She has been, for decades, she has been focused on ensuring the world's most marginalized communities are empowered with political voice and economic opportunity. She has a proven track record of excellence in designing intervention to advance financial inclusion and digital development. Before joining the Alliance, she founded the non-profit Future State, which led to research and advocacy to ensure more people benefit from the data economy. Her extensive background also includes setting up the digital development team in the USAID under the Obama administration, and also establishing the financial inclusion practice at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Priya, if you can reflect on how South-South cooperation and learning and using the Africa Data Leadership Initiative as the example. Over to you.
Thank you, Zanofa. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay, wonderful. Well, I think you've set up perfect lineup, because I'm gonna probably go even further than Jane here. So it's nice to be with you, and I'm really sorry that I'm not there in person. There's nothing like being in the room together. So I think the thing I wanted to bring to the table is, the importance of peer learning. And at Dial, one of the things that we really ground ourselves in is that there's no one country that has figured out how to do digital in a way that fosters massive participation, that really creates competitive, thriving innovation ecosystems, and doing so in a way that really gives people rights and transparency and full agency. So those are 3 legs of the stool that, probably represent a North Star, if you will, but nobody's gotten there. So rather than thinking of there being one single recipe for success, the real question is, how do you pick and choose and learn from the successes of others? And in that spirit, Dial has teamed up with Smart Africa and the UN Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. And we've been running now for a few years the Africa Data Leadership Initiative. And it's a really incredible opportunity for more practitioners, the people who aren't able to travel to New York, but really are the ones designing systems and designing policies and really thinking through pricing strategies and everything else, for them to get together with their peers, not only in government, but also from the private sector and civil society, and roll up their sleeves around pretty tricky issues around driving digital transformation. So rather than kind of opine in the abstract, what I thought I would do today is give you a flavor of the types of questions that even came out last week when we were running a session on AFCFTA and how to foster digital trade with the cohorts that represented Ethiopia, Ghana, I believe Zambia, and some others. So the questions that participants are posing to one another, many of them are very technical in nature. How should we think about the pricing of an authentication of a digital ID? What's the cost of running? And Shuti, she mentioned Aadhaar, the annual cost of running it, and what are sustainability strategies for that? Some of the questions are more operational in nature. How might you run a data protection authority with some independence and without fear of retribution? Or how do you really involve the civil society so that they feel included? So a lot of operational questions come out. But I would say the real takeaway for me in being an observer to this peer learning platform is that the vast majority of questions really boil down to trust. So civil society organizations are very regularly asking questions about, how do we know, how do citizens know what's happening to their data, that their data is not misused? What's the redress that is available to me if I'm concerned about misuse of my information? Governments will say when talking about cross-border trade, well, how do I know that the cybersecurity practices of my neighbor or my trading partner is up to snuff? How do I know that our approaches to data protection are indeed the same? Where's the transparency in that? And I'm looking at another question that came out last week. Where and how will disputes get resolved? Who's the authority? As things, of course, will go wrong. So I think my takeaway, and Hassan, you asked us to really think about being practical. Of course, South-South cooperation and peer learning are really important to overcoming some basic knowledge gaps that are more technical and operational in nature. But I think as we think about this march towards Sevilla and other forums for shining a light on the opportunity for digital transformation, we have to make a call for investing in the mechanisms that build trust. It's the relationship building, it's the transparency mechanisms, it's the metrics like the Digital Economy Navigator that's really going to create that resilience and that trust, because otherwise this is all really aspirational, and trust isn't built in a day. It's actually usually lost in a day, as we're seeing here in the US. Those things take time. So Jane, maybe I'll respectfully disagree with you. We need bold and decisive action, but investing in these mechanisms of trust, both at the institutional level and really at the relationship level, that's a long game and we can't ignore it. So that's maybe my strongest takeaway for all of this. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you so much for your. We will now go to Liz Kehina. She's the Chief Growth Officer, North America for Nortel. The Nortel is a multinational strategic change and technology company headquartered in Estonia with operations in the UK, US, Canada, Mexico, Europe, and the Middle East and Africa. Elizabeth is a visionary leader, strategist, and author known for driving digital transformation, design innovation, and AI adoption across industries. With over 2 decades of experience, she has led global teams in harnessing technology to reshape businesses and enhance customer experience. She has also held leadership positions at the IBM and Capgemini. That's yes. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So let's Liz. The Global South needs to develop further capabilities in policy and implementation of best practices in digital transformation. What is your assessment of the needs and challenges that your partners face, and how can Global South learn from them to develop homegrown solutions? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today, and good morning, everyone. I wanted to share that I'll state the obvious. The Global South stands at a pivotal moment in its digital transformation journey. While there's recognition that you've heard of what digitization holds for economic growth, service delivery, and citizen empowerment, many countries still face persistent gaps when it comes to policy design, implementation capacity, and access to best practices. So if I begin with the needs and challenges, some of the needs are policy and regulatory frameworks, and a lot of these frameworks include foundational digital strategies and legal frameworks focusing on data privacy, interoperability, cybersecurity, and public-private partnerships. Without clear policies, as we talk about digital transformation, digital projects often stall or operate in silos without this foundation. As far as implementation capacity, this is where it is important to have technical expertise, procurement flexibility, and cross-sector coordination to deliver these large-scale digital services. And several of my previous speakers spoke about funding and infrastructure gaps. Prerequisites, of course, are reliable internet, cloud infrastructure, digital ID systems, secure payment networks, especially for people in rural areas. These are the bedrocks of digital inclusion. As we consider trust and change management, which was just echoed by the previous speaker, digital transformation is not just a technology shift, it is a cultural and political shift. Citizens and civil servants need to trust digital platforms. This requires transparency, stakeholder engagement, and visible public value. So how do countries in the global south move forward and even create their own homegrown solutions? I would recommend starting small and scaling smart. Pilot solutions, which could begin with digital business registration or e-taxation that deliver quick wins and build that credibility and trust, and then creates the demand for more broad platform reforms. Invest, as we discussed already, in digital talent and governance. In Estonia, where my company is headquartered, we have an Estonian Digital Governance Academy, which has really brought together digital units, a chief digital officer, and is instrumental to creating that centralization of leadership. And think ecosystem, not just e-government. So what I mean by ecosystem is being inclusive of education, fintechs, startups, and social services. And you also need to be considerate of open standards. So there's a lot of open frameworks out there. We're a big fan of an open framework called X-Road for data interoperability. But by using these things, the Global South can actually leapfrog legacy systems and build resilient homegrown digital solutions. An example from our own work in Africa, in Nigeria specifically, was in and around the area of public finance management. And I want to bring this up just because of the impressive results we were able to see by building a government integrated financial management information system. This not only lifted Nigeria's reputation with the IMF and World Bank, it also saved the government 21 billion euros. It saved citizens 13 million euros on bank transaction fees. And it removed 60,000 ghost workers from the government payroll. This sort of reform makes it the ease of doing business or trade with the country much more appealing. And a similar project we did was in Botswana, reforming the tax management system. From a citizen standpoint, citizens could file tax returns in less than 5 minutes. This, of course, creates a good feeling of the citizenry and again goes back to that point and necessity of building trust. You don't need to hire a big global technology firm always to do this, or if you do, you could ask that firm if you could cooperate or co-create and maybe staff a project with 50% of their people and 50% of your local citizens. So you are also giving the local citizens on-the-job training, if you will, whilst learning from some of the people who have done this and implemented these sorts of projects and programs before. So I think that there is a lot of hope that we should all be feeling in the room today and together, and I thank you for your invitation to have me here.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Liz. Thank you very much. We will now go to the next speaker from the UNOSSC, and that's Grace Wang. She's the Trust Fund Director. Previously, she has served as the Deputy Director of Programs and Operations here in the UNOSSC. Before that, spent decades in UNDP as a lead advisor on South-Southern Triangle Cooperation, practice manager on poverty, and also as a team leader on democratic governance, HIV/AIDS and poverty in the UNDP country of China. Before that, she's also worked with governments, international NGOs, and academic institutions and media outlets. So Grace, how can South-South Triangle cooperation support digital trade? What modalities and mechanisms can better be leveraged to achieve impact at scale?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you for everybody for this dialogue. When we talk about impact at scale, I think it encourages us to move beyond what we are doing already and looking forward, thinking about a historical opportunity of moving from sporadic cooperation to system collaboration. I'm not a digital trade expert. I think maybe many of you are or are not. Let us picture together. Yeah, let us picture together. Let us picture an electric vehicle produced in Asia. Okay, the EV is rolling off an assembly line in Thailand. Its battery cell is produced in Indonesia. Its software programming is produced in China. And then, how about the semiconductor? Most likely nowadays imported from Malaysia. What is it that ties all this together? Digital cooperation and data. From design specifics to logistics, to standardization, to certification, data is being shared across borders in a real-time manner. And that enables diagnostics to happen. That enables, for example, the ASEAN transit system built also in collaboration under the policy framework of Regional Economic Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, to enable fast cross-border custom clearance. Even when the vehicle hit the road, data is being shared for regional smart charging system. So this is today the e-trade happening in some modern industries, but it is also happening in traditional industries, agricultural products, energy and all this. The future of trade is no longer just simply exchanges of products. It is data-driven, digital value chains. So this is where South-South and triangular cooperation face a historical opportunity to move from the very important project-based cooperation to system collaboration. How do we do that? I would like to highlight 3 pathways today and building on the remarks already delivered. Number 1, regional integration. We already talked about RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, building on the member states of ASEAN, adding China, Republic of Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. Together, this is not just a trade deal, this is a digital alignment. And we talked a lot of good examples and also the very promising digital protocol under the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Latin America, the Pacific Alliance countries are also doing the same effort. Just last year, 35 countries reached agreement through Astana Ministerial Declaration to together promote ecosystem for digital economy. So that is the first pathway, policy integration at regional level, especially when globalization is being severely impacted today. Second pathway is value chain approach. I just talked about the EV value chain, and it will apply to all strategic sectors. So value chain approach naturally builds multi-stakeholder partnership from the country government-to-government policy dialogue and negotiation to the industrial association's standardization, certification, to the private sector's production, to the bank's financing mechanism. Naturally, this is where South-South and triangular cooperation in a multi-stakeholder approach can deliver larger impact. And lastly, capacity development as the third pathway. Digital cooperation and digital trade does not automatically lead to inclusive growth. It does not automatically benefit women and micro, small, medium enterprises because of digital divide. Capacity development, skills training are fundamental for all these things to actually serve sustainable development. There, the UN Office for South-South under the Trust Fund portfolio, we have examples like with the support of China and the UN Fund for South-South cooperation, there's training for cross-border e-commerce. For over 1,000 participants from about 100 countries, 45% participants are women. Under the India UN Development Fund, during COVID pandemic, in Antigua and Barbuda, enterprises, small companies are supported to leverage cross-border e-commerce platforms to still maintain a line of their business, not necessarily cross-border, but even domestic. We have new service lines of Solution Lab that is also aiming to incubate, test, and scale up solutions. Now let me conclude with a call for action. We all know the FFD outcome document draft 1 emphasized the triangular cooperation needs to be enhanced to connect everybody. In today's world, think about the risk of fragmentation and division. Triangular cooperation is indeed a mechanism that we can use to build linkages. DCO is a typical example. With major most of your members from the Global South, you also have Greece, Cyprus from Europe. So UN Office for South-South Cooperation under UN Fund for South-South established a window, triangular cooperation. I call for action for partners to come together to see how can we maybe form a thematic funding mechanism to try to tackle those issues like policy harmonization, regulatory convergence, capacity development and data-driven solutions, and value chain approach to actually demonstrate and support regions and globally to achieve impact at scale. The GA resolution on South-South cooperation, the most recent one, 2024, in paragraph 28, echoed Global Digital Compact, calls specifically UN Office for South-South Cooperation and UN system to work with partners to support efforts in developing countries on digital cooperation and data. So using digital trade and digital economy, I think together we can do a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Grace. Now we'll go to our dear colleague Amir Hamza Said. He's the Assistant Manager, Global Advocacy at the Islamic Development Bank. He also leads ISDB's contribution to the global development agenda at the international fora, including the G20, heads of MDB's forum and the UNDA. He also chairs the ISDB's SDGs committees of practice and serves as the member of the ISDG's Task Force on Sustainable Finance. Previously, he has worked as a lead strategic coordinator to the Vice President of Operations at the ISDB. Prior to that, he's also worked at the World Bank, the UN offices in New York, Abuja, and also the private sector in Germany and India. Amir, so if you can reflect on what are the barriers to financing and how is the bank assisting member states in unlocking access to funding for digital trade and transformation?
Thank you very much, Zona, for having me. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by thanking DCO for inviting me to be part of this discussion, as well as UNOSSC. We go long back, UNOSSC and ISDB, more than 25 years with this on cooperation and engagement. Now, before I get into the financing part, let me also throw some light. ISDB is an acronym for Islamic Development Bank. We are a group of 57 member countries under the ambit of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So we are the bank by the south. So all our member countries are from the south, and we're also working for the south and beyond. So we have member countries in Latin America and stretching up until East Asia. So with that, let me get into the question. One of the important things that we are facing in our own member countries, especially in the OIC, is about, if we talk about the numbers, about 820 million people remain offline. And the most unfortunate part is, despite a greater demand for reducing the digital divide, there has been not much progress with respect to the expectations which are there, not only from the government alone, but also from the private sector and beyond. Now, let me outline the barriers that we see in financing digital trade and transformation. And first one is infrastructure gaps and affordability. As I said, we have about 820 million, but out of that, if you talk about proportionate, nearly 60% in the OIC member countries lack meaningful connectivity. And if we look at the cost, so on average, the accessing data costs about 8% of their incomes, whereas the UN target is on affordability for access to digital is about 2%. So there's a variance of about 6%, so which is basically going out of the disposable income. Second is the lack of bankable projects. So many member countries that reach out, they submit projects which do not meet the investor criteria, and particularly in building the last mile connectivity, especially on the digital public infrastructure side. And third, and most importantly, is the lack of cohesive data governance frameworks. And this links to policy and regulatory fragmentation, which sort of acts as a deterrence, in fact, crowds out private sector participation. On the other side, we do have rapid AI and fintech advancements, and that in actuality also sometimes outpace the regulatory advancement that happens in member countries. And I guess this also goes beyond the OIC member countries as well. And last but not the least is limited access to blended finance. So despite giving financing, one of the important things is to make it affordable even to our own member countries. So in that sense, so in the pecking order of priority, without access to blended finance, there is a restriction participation in the digital trade. Now, while we look at the barriers, so what is the bank doing more strategically in terms of intervention? So first, we have cognizantly recognized and we're scaling up infrastructure and bankable projects. So for the year of 2025 to 2027, we have pledged about $250 million under our own digital inclusion strategy program to co-finance projects in rural broadband and smart grids. Second, we are piloting scalable models. Most importantly, we are looking at AI-driven village planning in Indonesia. We're strengthening the e-governance systems, G2C systems in G2C as well as G2B in Pakistan. We're also looking at digital ID systems in Maldives. And the idea is to be able to create models for replication and taking it forward in other countries. Going also beyond tokenism, we're also looking at gender-responsive digital trade. So through our own trade digital initiative, we have trained about 250,000 women in the OIC member states, especially on e-commerce. And one of the important examples I can highlight is Pakistan has seen a 35% rise in women-led SME exports connected to digital. We're also partnering with UN Women, where we launched Sharia-compliant trade platforms in Indonesia, dispersing about $50 million to 50,000 women entrepreneurs. So those are some of the strategic interventions. So what are we planning to do in future, leading up to the 2030 agenda for action? Now, the first one is climate smart digital infrastructure. So it sort of gets challenging to be able to comprehensively address the whole gamut of SDGs, but at the same time, while we focus on digitization, jobs, etc., also keeping in mind how do we address the sustainability angle. So the AgTech platforms, especially to empower 5 million smallholder farmers and connecting them to the smart grids through renewable energy sources is something that we're trying to do by 2030. Second is inclusive digital ecosystems, and this is where it's important to have self-sustainability, self-sufficiency as a critical factor within our own member countries. So we are partnering with fintech innovators to launch 50+ digital finance hubs, largely targeting 20 million unbanked women and youth in our member countries. The third is resilient digital governance. So right now we are supporting about 15 member countries to adopt national digital ID systems and interoperable e-payment rails, reducing cross-border trade costs by about 30%. And last but not the least, establishment of digital corridors to facilitate trade in Central Asia and MENA to cut custom clearance by about 50%. So going forward in the immediate future, what we are looking at also to co-host the Global Islamic FinTech Summit in 2026, aligning with the Sharia principles of the digital public infrastructure. Right now, the Islamic FinTech market is roughly valued at about $80 billion in 2023, and we are looking at least 100 million unbanked OIC citizens to be able to be connected digitally. Second is we are also looking at launching ethical digital trade compacts in our select member countries which are ready. For this, we are going to leverage partnerships with ITU, UNDP, and GSMA. I have some other initiatives as well that the bank has been doing. I can talk to it maybe perhaps in the follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you so much for your intervention. We'll now go to the next speaker. Aura, thank you very much for coming in person. She's a fellow at the investment team at Core Develop. Core is a global non-profit fund accelerating the adoption of safe and inclusive shared digital public infrastructure. She has strong public sector background experience, having also worked in France and Colombia. For example, in Colombia, she worked in the presidential office in Colombia, leading transparency and anti-corruption efforts. She designed and implemented Colombia's first public innovation policy at the National Planning Department. Most recently, as a digital government director at the Colombian Ministry of Technologies, she spearheaded the DPI projects. She's also worked in the private sector. So, if you can reflect on how is the LAC Digital Citizen Initiative helping to bridge the digital divide in the Latin American Caribbean region, and what would be the objectives it has set out to achieve? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And as you said, I am originally from Colombia. I worked 10 years in government. I deployed a DPI project, actually using X-Road. And now that I'm at Co-Develop, it's amazing to support the region. And I'm going to talk about a project that we recently launched. And when I say recently, basically last week during the World Sprint meetings. But I'll give some context so the project can be more clear. One is Co-Develop is a global fund. We support countries on their digital public infrastructure adoption. That means that one of the things that we do is to support initiatives that the countries have already prioritized, and the type of grantees could be very diverse. We can work with civil society organizations, we can work with startups, / what we call digital public goods teams, basically startups with open source solutions. We can also work with multilaterals, with regional banks. Through them, through their loan separations, we support those initiatives. We also work with academia because research on DPI and in the different regions, it's something that Co-Develop is really interested in. So the type of grantees is very diverse, right? And so this project, the LAC Digital Citizen Initiative, is basically a project where, I don't know if you know LAC, but LAC is a very unique region in terms of DPI. It's like a brownfield region. We have a strong legacy on many things like digital ID. I'm Colombian and I kind of like born with a national ID, so the digital ID is like a very natural segue because many countries in the region have already a civil registry authority that gives a national ID. So it's a brownfield region, and because of that legacy and because of the digital government initiatives in many countries, we have an ICT ministry and ICT authority. And based on that legacy, for over 20 years, the LAC region has a network of ICT ministries. So basically every ICT ministry of those 33 countries in the Caribbean, South America, and Central America have shared a network where they shared some best practices, peer learning, and recently, 10 years ago, they started to have working groups. One of those working groups is on interoperability, now called interoperability and DPI. And every year you have, of course, like an executive committee with a president, and in those working groups you have a leader. And last year in the interoperability working group, Uruguay was leading that working group. And they proposed to start a pilot trying to connect the digital IDs among Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. Why? Because they share the borders, their neighbor, and they have like a lot of exchanges, not only in with a business approach, but also individuals. There's a lot of migration among those three countries. And of course, they're part of a big umbrella called Mercosur, which enables those type of projects, right? And so they started a pilot trying to build actually like a broker connecting digital ID providers from those three countries and digital services. And the pilot was a success. Was a success because citizens that goes through, I don't know, like from Uruguay to Argentina or to Brazil started to use that platform to do services online, but also because businesses like small and medium enterprises started to say, this is like a game changer. I don't know if you've been in LAC, but in that region in particular, they don't drink coffee or tea, they drink something called mate. So they're obsessed with mate, and mate started to be like, it was easier to import and export mate because of this project. So that working group within that network called REPL started to realize that more countries were raising their hands saying, I want to be part of this project. And from co-develop, that's an amazing indicator. It's like having the opportunity to support a country demand-driven initiative, right? And not one country, 6 countries started to say, I want to be part of this. So we started the conversations last year during the World Bank annual meetings, trying to understand if the World Bank, IDB, and co-develop could support this project. And why IDB? Because it's like our Inter-American Development Bank. It's the actor, the regional actor that is supporting a lot of DPI projects through their loans operations. The World Bank, they recently launched their DPI roadmap. And of course, co-develop, this is the type of projects that we support. So this alliance that was launched last week, as I mentioned, basically is trying to have an MVP by end of this year. So we're basically working on top of the pilot among Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina. We did a workshop 3 weeks ago with the countries that already showed some interest, which are basically Chile, Paraguay, Peru, Dominican Republic, and Costa Rica. So as you said, not only South American, as you can see, not only South American countries, but also countries in the Caribbean, trying to map out the potential use cases. And from that workshop, we realized that in LAC, use cases around migration, migratory services, cross-border mobility of people, tax administration, and foreign trade are actually use cases that could benefit from this initiative. We don't have a LAC stack in our region. We don't have a LAC union, as you know. We have like this type of like umbrellas like Mercosur, UNOSSC, etc. But this project is enabling to start the conversation around frameworks, around standards. And when we launched this project last week, the OAS, the Organization of American States, which is more political, is actually trying to help us to start those conversations around the countries, right? Like among those country members. So the project is it's a very agile project. We need to deliver a broker by end of this year, like December 2025. We expect to have 6 countries integrated in this project, and based on that, to try to help scale this up next year. There's an annual meeting this year from Red Hill, so we'll have all the ministers, sometimes we have presidents, in October of this year, and we expect to showcase some of those use cases and some of those integrations. I just wanted to finish by saying that 1 month ago, we hosted, like co-developed with the University of West Indies, we organized the Caribbean DPI Forum in Jamaica, and it was amazing to share this experience, but also African experiences on this. So we had a panel sharing the LAC perspective and the African perspective on a project called DigiPass, trying to promote like this exchange of best practices and some lessons learned. So at co-develop, I honestly think that these 2 projects, like the one that we're doing in LAC and the one that we're like promoting in Africa, are actually helping us to understand how can we support these cross-border projects, cross-border identification or digital ID among the region. So I'm really excited about this. I hope to share more about like the results and the impact of this project in a couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aura, and thank you very much for bringing that regional perspective. We in the office do have an online platform called the South-South Galaxy, which we use to solicit in-house over 960 solutions and good practices. We would be open to have follow-up conversations with you and other speakers in terms of how we can capture some of the examples that were cited today. So I think it's been an excellent panel, and I think they all deserve a good round of applause. Thank you so much. Before we go to the Q&A, Anksit, could we try and play the video from Dima? Thank you. I hope it works this time. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends. Welcome to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, and thank you for joining us for this pertinent side event on advancing inclusive digital trade through multi-stakeholder cooperation. I wish at the outset to thank our partners, the Digital Cooperation Organization, for the stewardship in co-organizing this dialogue. In the lead-up to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, we are reminded that financing sustainable development cannot be achieved by traditional means alone. We need bold, inclusive, and cooperative strategies rooted in the realities and homegrown innovations of the Global South. South-South cooperation has long stood as a cornerstone for solidarity among developing countries. Today, it is a catalyst for transformation and development acceleration. It enables countries not only to share knowledge and experiences, but to co-create and share scalable, high-impact solutions and resources. In the context of financing for development, this is especially critical. Over 2.7 billion people worldwide, most of whom live in the Global South, remain offline and lack access to essential digital resources. And in 2024, only 35% of people in least developed countries are reported to be using the internet, compared to 93% in high-income countries. And globally, there are 244 million fewer women than men using the internet, which limits not only individual opportunities, but also broader economic growth and innovation. The digital economy represents one of the greatest opportunities of our time. It can leapfrog development, it can reduce inequalities, stimulate growth, and empower communities. But only if access is equitable and the necessary infrastructure and capacities are in place. UNOSSC is very proud to partner with the Digital Cooperation Organization to advance digital inclusion, innovation, and capacity building through South-South and Triangle cooperation. By leveraging our comparative advantages, we are mobilizing knowledge and partnerships to build digital ecosystems that can unlock trade, jobs, and gender equitable growth. Initiatives such as the ones supported by the India-UN Development Partnership Fund that we manage here at UNOSSC are supporting digital health infrastructure in island states, including Samoa and Papua New Guinea. The Samoa Knowledge Society initiatives and Papua New Guinea Center of Excellence in Information Technology are empowering young entrepreneurs through digital skills and innovation, demonstrating how South-South and Triangle cooperation can translate local needs into scalable and high-impact solutions. UNOSSC's new South-South and Triangle Cooperation Solutions Lab is building digital linkages, co-creating and scaling up innovative South-South and Triangle cooperation solutions among member states, United Nations agencies, and partners, and harnessing local, regional, and interregional expertise and resources. These efforts, rooted in solidarity and mutual learning, embody the ambitions of the Financing for Development Conference to explore new financing modalities, scale existing ones, harness digital transformation, and address structural inequalities. In fact, as highlighted in the draft outcome document for FFD4, international trade and digital innovation must be seen as engines for development. But to make that vision a reality, we must go beyond dialogue and move towards action, including expanding cooperation and research and development by connecting and strengthening the think tanks from the Global South to identify valuable entry points for accelerating inclusive digital progress. Also sharing practical experiences and collaborative testing of innovative solutions for bridging the growing digital divide, particularly in terms of connectivity, digital skills, and public digital infrastructure. Supporting digital literacy and capacity building efforts, and leveraging triangular cooperation to make good use of the expertise and financing of the wider development ecosystem, including development banks, foundations, and the private sector. South-South and Triangle cooperation are not just financing development opportunities, they are shaping a future that is more inclusive, more resilient, and more interconnected. Let me close with a call for collective commitment and action to co-invest, co-innovate, and co-deliver results for people and planet through South-South and Triangle cooperation. Thank you, and I wish you a fruitful and inspiring session.
Thank you, Elsie. So that concludes all the interventions from all the speakers. So if I can have 5 minutes of your time, the speakers, then we would open the floor for any burning questions or interventions, either online or from here. I don't know if there are any online participants have raised. Okay. So anybody here in the room would like to make any observation or raise a question or two? Can I put someone on the spot? Yes, before we go to the close. Yeah.
I'm curious to know what happens.
After that.
What happens now? What do we do? Post discussion.
Yeah, so there will be a summary of the discussion, of the action points, and we will also be having a follow-up conversation with the DCO colleagues, and we also plan to have an event during the FFD, and there will be a series of conversation. We'll of course engage with all the speakers that have spoken today to see how best. I'm sure we'll hear some pointers from Samir, who is based at DCO. Right? Can I put someone on the spot? Dumitru, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Zanka. I have 2 questions. One is for the colleague from the Carnegie team. Jane, you mentioned about a very interesting, in our opinion, tracking instrument, right? Through which you mapped, I understand, in about 50 countries in Africa, right? You mapped all the relevant policy instruments. The question is, after doing this mapping, what is next? What is your plan in terms of going forward? And yesterday we briefly also discussed about and it was raised today also, the topic of the convergence, right? What are the next steps and what are some of the key takeaways that you already have from this mapping exercise? That's one. And the second question is to the colleague from Estonia, right? I'm very much familiar with some of the business models, right? Some of the past recent experiences that you had. For the Global South, and I think the colleagues raised this topic, there will be need indeed for some new business models that are developed by local ICT companies that take into account the opportunities and the emerging opportunities. Right? What would be your major advice towards those companies and sectors, ICT sectors in those countries? Thank you.
we go to the colleague online?
Sure.
Jane?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for that intervention, and also thank you to all the other interventions. This has been a very engaging conversation. So I guess first is to say that this is still an ongoing project. We have about 35 countries that we have about 500 data sets. So this research came out of a keen understanding or awareness that we need a better understanding of how the continent is shaping its digital economy. And so we want, especially from a regulatory perspective. So we wanted to try and provide that framework empirically. And so we decided to map the digital economy policy laws and regulations, looking at from a digital infrastructure perspective, looking from a digital platforms, looking from a digital innovation, and then skills. Because we thought there's a lot of stories and a lot of nuances that were happening in the continent that people are not aware. So the objective of this research is first for awareness. We want a central repository, one comprehensive place where if you want to know what is happening in Chad, you can click on the country and you can get the information of the kind of policies, laws, and regulations. For those of you who have access to online chat, I have dropped the link there because this is a document. It's a free repository for anybody to interact with it. And we're happy also to get your feedback on what it is. We have about, as I said, we have about 35 countries, and we're trying to build it out to all 55 countries. We've also included the Africa Union. And of late, in addition to trying to get all the data points for all the countries, we're also trying to do thematic groups. So of late, we have also looked at artificial intelligence. For those of you who are aware, about 3 weeks ago, there was a Kigali AI Summit, and there was a discussion of how the continent is developing AI strategies. So we decided to see how has this been done. First, we needed to know the awareness of how policymakers are positioning that. So even as we go to Kigali, we have insights. Because that is one of our objectives, is to bring policy insights and like to have a discussion around this and to say, this is what we have. Is this adequate? Is it not adequate? Secondary, it's also for peer learning. Our countries looking at each other and seeing how things are being developed, especially from the regional perspective. When we talk about the African Union developing, for example, the Africa Continental AI strategy, how is it then being adopted? Or the Malabo, especially very relevant to this, to data protection. We saw a lag in that adoption. Have we seen data protection policies that have been able also to enhance it? So for learning and also then for providing insights like this, and we hope that you can continue engaging that and also find uses for it. I would be happy to hear new interactions as to how you can write a piece around it, especially on digital trade, very relevant to this topic. And that is also one of the reasons why when I was looking at it when it comes to how policies are being done for digital ID and for mobile money and for data exchange, you find they are very separate. They are very separate, done by very different departments and published, but by one government. But then how is that interoperability structure that helps to develop something like DPI? So such learnings, I think, are important for us as we move forward. And that was why my recommendation said we need to probably change the architecture of how we are trying to do this holistic digital transformation through initiatives like DPI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane, for that comprehensive response. Liz, can I turn to you, please?
Yes, of course. We published a website a few years ago called personalgovernment.com. It is not exhaustive of everything in the universe. It is a work in progress, as is everything, but you will begin to see some frameworks and some white papers that we've done with some other academic institutions that could be a good building block for the answer to your question. I was also remarking before the panel that Nortal is in the process of acquiring a 700-person company in Latin America across 6 countries. And this company has in the past done a little bit of work in public sector. With our partnership and our post-merger integration, I hope that we can increase this and also share some of our historic learnings, not only from Estonia, but other work that we've done around the world in public sector to help to grow this. There's also e-government academy in Estonia, which I don't know how strong their online offering is, but maybe there is also, if there is appetite and interest, maybe the possibility of figuring out how we can create a digital academy and obviously make sure that it's language accessible to different countries in the South, that we can make this, on the topic of open source, make this information more accessible to everyone who may be finding it of value.
Thank you, Liz. So we'll go to the closing. Samir, can I turn the floor to you for closing remarks? Thank you. You're muted.
Yes, I think that's fine now, right?
Yes.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Please accept our greetings from DCO in regard first. Thank you very much to the audience. I'd like to begin with the audience for being with us. And our experts in the room have given us today incredible wisdom. And to bounce on what Liz was saying, experts in the room have made accessible to us an amount of wisdom today, not from theory, but from policy to practice, on how they're shaping the narrative on the ground from different parts of the world, from Europe to Latin America to Africa, and mention was made of other parts of the world from the global south. So we're very privileged today to have been privy to this kind of wisdom, and how does it drive the discussion on digital trade on the FFD4 pathway. I also was given the privilege to summarize the key takeaways. It's not an easy job, given all the wisdom and experience that you've shared. I'll make a humble attempt. What we have as certainty coming up from this discussion today is that multi-stakeholder cooperation is shifting the needle. That is very clear for us. Alignment between governments, private sector, MDB, civil society is accelerating the digital trade implementation. How? Policy to practice, and what was recommended was decisive coordination is more needed than ever. Harmonizing of standards and regulations. Number two, scalable models. We already have templates in the form of the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol. We have digital corridors. We have initiatives like We Elevate that demonstrate homegrown, practical, replicable solutions. They are already in motion. We should leverage to promote cross-border trade. Third, financing innovation is key. How can you support member states, project owners, to have more bankable and feasible projects in digital financing projects that can tap into the innovative pathways like that the MDBs and other financing markets are producing? How can we help them to access and leverage the funding that is increasingly being promoted by partners like ISDB and IDB in Latin America? Fourth, digital trade is a great equalizer. I stole that from Nshuti. I love it. It's amazing. How digital trade has to be inclusive and be a tool for inequalities, not widening them. Fifth, South-South and triangular cooperation is a catalyst. Leveraging peer learning, shared frameworks, regional integration can fast-track digital transformation across the global South, provided that we enhance transparency, resilience, and security. We have also heard from cases around the world that really speaks to the concrete steps being taken by governments, by civil society, by a multi-stakeholder approach. What does that tell us? As we march towards FFD4, we have to commit even more to transforming our insights that we gathered today into partnerships and investments, whether it is through piloting cross-border digital trade frameworks, supporting gender-responsive initiatives, or mobilizing innovative financing mechanisms. This is our moment to make a difference. Let's commit to ensuring that digital trade becomes a true engine of sustainable development. Before we close, I would like to extend our thanks to the Secretary General of DCO, Dima Al Yahya, and the Director of UNOSSC, Dima Al Khatib, for their commitment and leadership. True leaders build bridges, and it is up to us to break down the tyranny of silos that threaten to divide our work. This is what we, DCO and UNOSSC, sought to accomplish today. This is the essence of multilateral cooperation. I also want to extend a warm appreciation to the UNOSSC experts and colleagues, our amazing moderators and offer, for their tremendous support and hospitality. Thank you to our distinguished and our partners, ISDB, Dial, and Nortel. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you on the route to FFD4 and at FFD4. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Colleagues, participants, that concludes our meeting, and we appreciate your time, not any extra time with us. I think it's been a wonderful discussion, and we're hoping to follow up. We'll definitely follow up with you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to the facilitator as well.
I don't know.
Oh, yes, of course.